Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. It's here. We were finally able to purchase one. It's the new DeWalt Dcf 860, their latest and highest spec impact driver ever, and this represents a departure from over a decade worth of impact driver models from the brand. They have the Dcf 887, you know it, you love it, nearly as old as time at this point, and 1825 inch-pounds. Dcf 850, their micro-atomic, comes out the better part of a decade later, and somehow this small thing, also 1825 inch-pounds. Okay, finally, the new XR impact driver, the Dcf 845, comes out. Time to up the ante to 1825 inch-pounds again. And each one of them performs like it. Powerful, no doubt, likely enough for most impact driver tasks, let's be fair. But also coming in under the competition, something very un-DeWalt-like lately. Until now, that is. Finally, we have this. Their high-torque impact driver, Dcf 860, 2500 inch-pounds, 208 foot-pounds. That sort of thing, even after maybe growing a bit tired over here testing yellow impact drivers with little oomph difference, perks our ears up real quick. So today we're gonna torque test it, see what pouch cell batteries do for each of these brands, and for once try to measure some driving speed up against some of the hardest hitting and latest models to see how this new guy stacks up, including Milwaukee Gen 4, Flex Quick Eject, and some new models to the channel, Makita's Gen 2 XGT, and Rigid. Unlike previous at-bats with a hyper stubby but girthy 850 model and the narrow yet a bit long 840 and 845 introductions, the new 860 is topping out all the specs. Highest torque, it's about $180, so highest there as well. It's a little bit of a chunker and both a bit longer and a bit wider than most of the competition here. 4.8 inches long ahead of the 4.5 inch Milwaukee. It's also delivering more impacts per minute, 4,500, which is insane. Even tools with 3 hammers aren't touching 4,500 these days. Seems like the yellow brand had enough of our snickering and decided to just slide all the character creation bars all the way to the right, maxing out everything. The bit retention collet is also looking a bit max size, does allow for one-handed install. Let's see how it does. Today we're using all new dyno runs, no archive footage here as we're going through and retesting each of the drivers on our list, but that's going to start with 2 new entries today to join the new Dcf 860, the Makita GDT02 and Rigid R862311. This is the latest Gen 2 40V XGT for the US and surprisingly does not unseat the DeWalt as being the most expensive today. This example being $164. It's rated at 1860 inch-pounds or 155 foot-pounds and 4100 IPM, no slouch there, and features Makita's usual sleek tapered head, addictingly good trigger, and lots of fun XGT settings. And this is Rigid's current top of the line, just $129, a bit longer at 5 inches, but curiously, not only does it advertise a lot of torque, but more torque than the Milwaukee Gen 4, so they say, so curious to see if we see that today. Now we get to see if that's all reality or make-believe. Our first test is working torque, 5 seconds and forward. Here's the Rigid up first. $142 foot-pounds, that's pretty good. And here is the latest from Milwaukee. $173 foot-pounds, so far quite a bit up on the Rigid despite those lower specs. We've gone through a few of these now, but they do make the sauce. Up next is the latest US spec XGT, their Gen 2, here it is. Just 96 foot-pounds. Yeah, this is a weird one. Even though it's a traditional 2-hammer design single spring, it behaves a lot like the Metabo HBT triple hammer. It ramps up, then goes into like a second mode once it can tell it's on something very stuck, and power drops off a cliff. No doubt good for screws with this type of IPM, but it's not programmed to like anything larger from what we can tell. The next highest power impact driver we've ever tested is the Flex Quick Eject, which looks like this. In our new barrage of testing, this spicy unit got 183 foot-pounds in this first short test. It's not kidding around. Alright, with no further ado, here it is, the new Dcf 860, the latest and only high torque impact driver from DeWalt. Let's see it. $143, beating the XGT for sure and sort of matching that Rigid, but not what we were expecting to see either. And boy, did we test the heck out of this one. Instead of the usual 3 tests, we did 5, and 5 of this next test 10 seconds of forward max torque, something you'll see here that the XGT doesn't excel at because it's living most of its time in its step-down mode. You can both hear and feel that difference. And the rigid putting up a nice 173 foot-pounds. In this retesting series we've done, we also see the Milwaukee doing well here to put up a near clean 200 with 199. That's top-level stuff. And the Flex, a full bit-punishing tool on the brink of overheating levels of torque, 227 foot-pounds. So yeah, in that test, the DeWalt competes in like so. $164 foot-pounds. Don't get me wrong, that's not exactly bad by any stretch from everything we've tested. That beats the DCF 845 XR's 141, which many felt was going to be their new flagship, and just coming up a bit short on the DCF 850 here. But a bit less than expected for this sort of size. I mean, look at these torque claims. That's matching the highest out there among any hardware store brand. And this IPM, man, those impacts per minute singing away. It's doing something. I mean, something's got to be going on inside this thing, right? Yeah, we think something's going on. Case in point, the rigid is able to exactly match its forward run in a somewhat unsurprising way. Made 173 before, makes 173 in reverse now. Makita makes more in reverse, also unsurprising. Makitas usually do for us. Even Team Red here, 198 foot-pounds, matching its 199 forward run. Now check out the DCF 860 and try not to act surprised. $203 foot-pounds. Say what? I know sometimes we see forward-reverse difference, but you might often see that in a RPM difference between forward and reverse, which doesn't register here at all for us. It went from being middle of the pack in its own brand to topping every DeWalt ever, every Milwaukee ever, Rigid, Makita, Hercules, and tying the biggest, baddest 24-volt XTR we've had on the channel, and with way more IPM, like ultrasonic levels of IPM from this thing. It's almost like it's hitting so fast that its vibration frequency feels less jittery than the Milwaukee. Very un-DeWalt-like, that attribute. It's definitely moving, but on tough stuff, maybe in a less harsh way, at least in my opinion. This disparity, though, forward to reverse, makes no sense. We tested this a bunch of times. I feel they accidentally made an impact driver for us, just removing stuff from an engine bay quicker maybe, but this is supposed to be their high torque impact driver. But I have a feeling most people are under the assumption that's going to be in forward, you know, driving stuff. Not made for folks like us. With specs only the likes of Flex have been able to be bold enough to advertise, which does, let's be real, still beat it in the numbers. Let's take a look at that. DeWalt doesn't quite unseat the heavier 24-volt tool here, which reaches up to 217 foot-pounds. Or does it? One of the reasons we wanted Milwaukee and Flex here today was they both, like DeWalt, offer pouch cell packs in their Forge and Stack lithium line. Both of which being 6 amp hour to DeWalt's 5 amp hour, the Flex even having the most watt hours total. So let's see if the difference each tool enjoys, if any, from using one of these. In forward here, the Milwaukee behaves like most impact drivers we see. It's a little bit better. Not typically the type of tool we suggest using the best batteries for. These use motors that are small enough that they're not tapping out most battery packs. The Flex picks up a similar percentage gain, but with higher numbers to start out with, is more impressive looking for sure. These are the tippy top of what we would ever see an impact driver make on the dyno. 232 foot-pounds, more than most cordless compact impact wrenches we've tested. The new DeWalt, yeah, this is a funky one. As usual, it seems with this tool bringing more curveballs. Obviously in reverse here, where it excels, with a 5 amp hour power stack, the tool would continually cut off for us around 7 to 8 seconds in every single time. Not heat related, you could put on a different battery right after this and run it much longer. But those numbers, even at 8 seconds in, this thing's cooking. So let's use the 6 amp hour XR, which is a higher performing, better comparison, oftentimes to the red and gray ones we just used in our experience. Here's that. $233 foot-pounds and a new record on the channel for an impact driver. Obviously, this thing has a motor behind it that's willing to suck up that juice, but just not in forward. With the high performance battery, even in forward, we see the same 155 to 165 foot-pounds as usual, which is sort of baffling. So to reviewers, users of this tool out there, if the tool times out on you, try a different battery maybe. It seems to do the trick, but is still sort of frustrating. And yeah, well, it's a lot of torque. You'd think at times not a whole lot looking at some of its numbers, but it's still plenty enough to break bits, which with this one's call it chuck is not something I'd wish even on someone I didn't like. Whew, boy, this was a pain. This took the better part of an hour. There's only one ball detent in here, which leads to some less than ideal retention of adapters, but also it's deeper than it needs to be, so you would think that this would stop like around here and it would retain there, but this is allowed to go all the way in, so when it breaks you actually have a solid shaft still here, which means when you disassemble this entire thing, all you see is a solid shaft in there that you have nothing to pry on. So this took quite a while to take out, probably the most difficult we've ever seen. Now this very well could be due to early JIS call-it versions versus US market releases, but either way, disassembly if needed from a broken bit is not fun and a lot more common with this tool than any other one we've been testing, and with that one ball bearing making it not easy either. Alright, let's rank these tools we've tested today, then we'll head over to what we cooked up for driving speed. Their dyno runs are turned into points, so effectively scoring forward torque twice here, hurting this tool, sort of as intended though, ranking these impact drivers after all. Then as a function of torque they made in tool length, where you can fit it, that's 42.3, 44.3, 43, 34.6, and 29.3. So the DeWalt is definitely up there with the best out there in tech, we feel. All three of these meet the 100% standard with their torque claims, impressive really for such high claims, then Rigid Makita both getting 90% of advertised from what we saw. As a function of their prices and their torque output, that's 9 points, 10.7, 12.2, 10.7, and 6.8. Totaling 254.3, 266, 280.2, 233.3, and 198.1. Placing the new XGT way down here with the last XGT, 40-volt architecture seems to be useful on higher power big tools, but not so much with little impact drivers, it would appear. The Rigid placing well here and above the DCF 845, that's quite decent. The Milwaukee and Flex sort of back up where they normally are. Some of these models haven't been retested with the same adapter and socket combo we're using now, so expect maybe some small differences updated in the future. And the new DeWalt improving on, but just over the current DCF 850, making it their best impact driver ever according to the torque tables. But this still feels a bit off. So we set up a driving speed test. We don't use too many dead trees around here simply because it's not as repeatable. So this is an extra deep 8-inch deep socket with a 1/2-inch nylon lock nut, which isn't easy to thread down but also not super hard either. New hardware for each tool in time for things to cool down in between runs. Drive it down until it free spins on the hex nut, and that's only 4.87 seconds on this Rigid. That might be good stuff, we'll see. Even with this lighter load than dyno runs, the Makita doesn't feel like it's stepping down into its eco mode or whatever it may be, but it sees 8.8 seconds to drive down the same test. More surprisingly, the Milwaukee completes this in 5 seconds, a smidge slower than the Rigid. Didn't see that coming. The Flex does what it usually does and completes this test in lightning quick 4.5 seconds. I think it was designed to win most of the testing we can come up with. But it was also designed before this DCF 860. The DeWalt singing this thing home in a mere 3.83 seconds. Topping out the stats here, and the only impact driver under 4 seconds in the long storied history of this test that goes back to a couple minutes ago. But I think you can probably pick up on our confusion with this tool, and maybe you'd agree following along. Fastest hitting, fastest driving when it comes to low torque stuff, and yet highest advertised torque, but only delivering that torque if it's in reverse and with certain batteries. And this tool in forward doesn't sound like this tool in reverse. In person, it's night and day. Sometimes we see coil spring direction or RPM difference from forward to reverse contribute to this, but not this much. Look at the curve difference here. We just feel there's more than simple hardware going on in this thing, some type of programming difference that allows it to release the beast only sometimes. But with not a lot of data so far to back that claim up. We just got this guy a couple days ago, this week, and we're making this video right now, and also Can't currently open it up and shoot high speed to investigate further because we have another bit stuck in it, which might take a while to resolve. So that's probably what we're going to be doing next. Stay tuned to see by clicking some buttons below. Overall, we think this is probably the best performing impact driver DeWalt's ever made, and definitely can dominate most any impact driver in certain settings or when using certain batteries. But why that difference exists when it does, we don't know yet. We look forward to finding out. Thanks for watching.